Hello, everybody. Good morning. We hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy with your families. And today, Kevin and I wanted to talk to you about how COVID-19 and this epidemic will affect our lives and is affecting our lives and some of the changes that may come out of this. We think it's an important topic. It's obviously very relevant. So we want to talk to you about that today. We know a lot of people are remote in terms of how they're working or doing business. We know a lot of people are quarantined. A lot of people are kind of isolated in some way. And as a reminder, if you're looking for something to read and educate yourself on while you're quarantined or while you've got some time, ebook.tgwipodcast.com is the URL where you can find our ebook. And we think it's pretty relevant because there are some tips in there about what to do during the upcoming correction. There are some ways to think about how to take care of yourself that we put out there when we knew something was coming but didn't know what or how bad. And it turns out it's pretty relevant right now. So one of the things we recommend you do while you've got some time is educate yourself. So that's just one thing you may want to take a look at. Kevin, let's get right into this. You and I were talking a lot about how things are going to change going forward. What are some things that you think are starting to change right in front of us that will be different going forward?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes is the leverage of technology in a number of different capacities. The first of which is working remotely. I've been working remotely the last, I think, 3 or 4 years or something along those lines. And I saw it as like this awesome perk. And it's fantastic. I think working from home is great. And I think you're going to see more of a shift towards that. And there's probably going to be some thoughts of efficiency where things that would normally be an in-person meeting can be done either over the web or a phone call or in an email. I think there's a lot of talk about that. So I'm hoping to see that there's going to be more of a luxury. It'll become more of a trend to see people working remotely and leveraging technology.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
Absolutely. And that being said, that may change the way people live, where people live. I know a lot of people move in closer, especially in like the San Francisco Bay Area. You live closer to the office because you don't want to commute 2 hours. Imagine now if you can work your job, but you can live wherever you want. I think that will also be an interesting thing to see where people geographically end up because we're leveraging technology more.
Yeah, it's interesting because you and I are in tech. We're pretty used to working remotely. I know both of us have been able to do that for quite some time, and we're good at it. It's just a another tool in our toolbox, if you will. It's just something we do sometimes, or in your case, all the time, right? But not everyone is. That's what's
Yeah.
interesting to me. We're seeing a lot of people start to work remotely who really never have, and it feels very different to them. So I think you're right. I think the more companies will make that a norm. So it's not just tech guys like us who work remotely, but it's a lot of what were traditional face to face jobs are now working remotely. So that affects people emotionally. It's a big
Very much
change.
so.
I think it's probably like a big life change. They're going to feel those stages of emotion as they go through it. And some of it may be fear. It might scare them in some way, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And it's hard to like when I think of being fearful, I think of just dive into as much knowledge as you can to understand what's going on. But in this case, it's kind of hard to, right? Like how do you understand something that's just unknown to many people?
So let's talk about that for a minute as its own topic, the unknown. And you and I were talking a little bit about this yesterday, and I I feel this grade anxiety under the surface
Yeah, me
because
too.
of the unknowns. Things are so unknown. And I actually deal pretty well with change. I mean, part of my job is that I'm a change agent, right?
Yeah.
So by nature, I embrace it. But there is a threshold for everyone where it just feels like complete uncertainty, no kind of stability, just causes some anxiety.
Very much so. And so how do you navigate that? Like for me, I try to I do all the tools. I meditate, I journal, I read, I talk to people, go see therapist or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily. It's like a magic bullet for alleviating the anxiety. It's still there. So for you, how do you cope with that?
Yeah, it acknowledging it, I think, is one way, but just to be completely transparent, it affects me. I,
Yeah,
I have felt the effects of it during this. I think, meeting with people or talking with people, this face to face voice, I'm sorry, video technology helps a ton. Being able to see someone else's face is really helpful. And,
yeah,
and just talking to people, I think, helps. Knowing you're not alone is probably what's comforting about that. Sharing some commonality helps a lot. But
yeah.
I think a lot of people are feeling this right now, man. I think tons of people are feeling this.
It's interesting because you peruse social media, you're going to see that there's a lot of people doing things like virtual happy hours or these fitness challenges where you tag people, right? And there's that concept of socializing with others that isn't going to go away. And I think it's cool to be using social media and technology and at that level.
Yeah, and I think some people who haven't done things like that may look at that a bit skeptically or may scoff at it in some way or think, man, that's just stupid, especially right now. But I would challenge those people to take a second look at it and try to come at it from a slightly different angle. Think about it as, hey, man, that could be something that's helpful. That may
Yeah.
actually help me out a little bit, or maybe I could try it just to see if it relieves a bit of the stress or anxiety that you may or may not be willing to admit is affecting you.
Yeah, that awareness is really big. There were times where in the last few weeks I couldn't sleep, just like, okay, what's going to happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. And that's what was the scariest part is the people you would go to understand what's happening. There was a lot of information that was still up in the air. And having to accept that you can't control any of that, I think that took a little bit of time for me to accept.
Yeah, one thing that's scary is how much it's affecting everyone in the globe and how
Hmm.
there are ripple effects everywhere. Something as simple as someone who has a job that relies on retail sales, and that's affected.
Yeah,
So they're worried now. What if they lose the job, or what if they have a break in the income for a while?
right.
I think about all the airline workers that were laid off, for example. What do they do now for work? I'm sure they're worried, and that's scary. I feel really bad for those people.
Yeah,
It's
me too.
also the reason why it reinforces what you and I have been trying to educate people on for over a year now, and or educating ourselves on, and why it's so important to have assets that generate passive income.
Yeah,
Because right now more than ever, I'm thankful for that, and right now I wish I had more,
me
and
too.
it makes me want to just continue on the plan to acquire as much as possible because I see it as security.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. I think when you're faced with this type of anxiety or these weird emotions, you're not really certain what to do with it. For me, I've had two choices, almost like succumb to the idea that I can't do anything, or find something that I can control and something that I can do to make myself and take care of my family. And that would be learning how to invest more, talking to people, networking more. If everybody's working from home, you know that they're at their computer. So there's an opportunity to connect with people, people using it in a form of virtual happy hour, but you can connect with people on LinkedIn or whatever, send those cold emails to build those relationships.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and build your portfolio. If you're just getting started, start to educate yourself and look at what it's going to take to build your portfolio, because if you lose your job and you're not able to bring in income, you want some money coming in.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's really important. It's an element of security.
absolutely. And that's not to say that if you have assets that you're immune to what's happening in the economy. That's absolutely not the case. People are getting hit left and right. Ultimately, we're just saying finding a way to build a better foundation or diversify where your income is coming from. Because if you had a portfolio of rental properties and multifamily properties, and let's say that your tenants are unable to pay all of it, or even you could try to find some of it that they can pay or whatever that's supplementing that income, just different ways to making sure that you are okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And everything will be impacted. Our
Absolutely.
multifamily, our single family,
Yeah, nothing's immune to it.
nothing's immune to it. That's why it's important to underwrite conservatively, stick to your principles and fundamentals, just to be sure that the asset can carry itself through the worst of times. So when things do start to correct, it will start making money again. But I can tell you right now that, looking at my 401k that I had before I educated myself on investing in real estate and real assets,
Hmm.
and compare that to the real assets I have. And there's absolutely no comparison, man. It's scary to look at the 401k and what's happened there. And then my other assets, uh, in much better shape. It's
Yeah.
not even a comparison. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, when I feel terrible about what's happening with the stock market,
Yeah.
and I'm fortunate that I had the idea and the initiative to take it out, put it in self-directed IRAs, and then turn those into notes. And that way, I was pretty protected from the crash of what's happening right now. So that feels good, but I feel bad that it's happening to others around me.
Yeah, me too. I feel bad for those people, and anything that we can do to help, if it's educate you on how you can use this to your advantage to come out of this stronger, or to give you some point you to some sources you can read to start to educate yourself on how to invest in the things me and Kevin are talking about that do better during these kinds of events, or whatever, please reach out to us.
Yeah, and if you want to jump on a Zoom call like this and just chat, we'd love to. And we found out that you can play cash flow game online, so we may be doing something like that, and we'd love to
Yeah,
people to join.
that would be awesome. So, Kevin, another thing that I think may change as we are impacted by this epidemic is what's important to people. I
Yeah,
think
good
that
point.
that may change a little bit.
Yeah,
People,
speaking of that, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, people are kind of I don't know, reconnecting with their families because they're spending more time together. They're forced to right now. It's an interesting side effect that I couldn't have predicted.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought that either, but it almost is a good byproduct of this, just reminding you of, hey, that's what's important, or whatever is important in your life. You now have the opportunity to really think about it. Speaking of that, I feel that the access to the internet, speaking of what's important, is becoming less of a luxury, but is being seen more of as a necessity. Imagine if you had to work remote, but you didn't have internet or whatever, or your internet was basic and it wasn't keeping up with what you needed. That's starting to see that infrastructure is becoming more and more necessary.
It's as much a necessity as electricity now,
Absolutely.
or running water. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, we never would have thought this even 15 years ago, but now here it is. And not having internet, it might rank up there with those two before we know it, because of so many people shifting and now working remotely and relying on that as a tool to work
Yeah.
as
And I
much as
even
electricity.
I even think telemedicine is going to be a big thing. I had a doctor's appointment where did it over the phone, or you could do a video chat. Right there, of course, there's certain circumstances where you need to be in front of a doctor. They will need to palpate something and give a more in-depth diagnosis, but not every appointment is like that. In that case, if you need to just, let's say it was just to jump on and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. What can you do for me? What should I do? That type of thing can be done over the phone. So, and when technology becomes even greater, let's say cameras get even more high def, and there's, let's say, different scanners available on the lenses and the cameras, you may do full remote with doctors. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the lifestyle it's pretty much changing before our eyes, and I almost feel like this is accelerating some of those things
Yeah.
in what technology is also probably going to change the type of work people do. For
Yeah.
example, a lot of things people do right now robots may do. Things like in, supply chain, or, you know, routine type task work that's done at a logistics center, like a warehouse or a shipyard. That stuff, maybe robots doing it, because if they have something like this where people can no longer work, productivity drops, and things can't get delivered or shipped.
Yeah.
Robots may replace that.
Education is another one too, right? Where were you talking about technology? I've seen, I know people tutor over Zoom calls type of thing. Imagine a classroom at that capacity where it's multiple uh, people in a single room learning about whatever's being lectured by the professor. So
Yeah.
I could see that happening.
And the professor being an AI.
Maybe not, but I mean, it's a possibility. We're one step closer to Skynet.
I'm telling you, John Connor.
John Connor, if you're out there, help.
So one other thing that I thought about that may be changing as a result of this, that kind of happens one way or the other, but I could almost see this as an accelerant, is people's worldview.
Yeah.
The way people see the world, globalization, their view on all of that, even politics. And not that I want to get into that on the show, but that stuff could change as a result of this, because a few reasons. One is the acceleration of technology, but in combination with this type of a pandemic where it's affecting everyone in the world the same way. We have this odd commonality right now,
Yeah.
you know, um, and it could shape the way people start to think about other parts of the world. We will quickly see just how high our reliance on China is when products stop flowing. They haven't yet, but they're starting to, right? But
Yeah.
things are, it takes a little while for the things that are stocked up in warehouses and within the supply chain to bleed off and kind of dwindle down to zero. But once those Chinese made products slow down because they're not being manufactured, because they had to send people home because they were sick or they didn't want them to get sick, and we start to see in America that we're not getting our products, we can't just hop on Amazon and order whatever we want and have it show up the next day. That's going to start to wake people up and make them realize just how much we depend on them.
Yeah. And speaking of the dependency, I think the everyday jobs that we sometimes overlook but are absolutely necessary, and I'm talking everything from people that stock the shelves at grocery stores to medical professionals, all of those things that sometimes I think we take for granted. There's going to be, at least it's shifting the way I perceive it, and I'm sure that there are people out there that are seeing that too, more of an appreciation for that. Think of those people, and I think that's an interesting thing that you talk about, changing the worldview. I think that's one way it will change as well.
Yeah, I think people should try their best to use this as an opportunity. I know this has been a bad thing in many ways, and certainly a scary thing in many ways, but I'm trying to think of it as, where can I see opportunity in this? Where can I see, quite frankly, where could I see financial opportunity?
Right.
But also, where can I see opportunities in other ways? Where can I see opportunities to grow, to become a better person, all of that. And I think that's the way you have to kind of look at this. It's scary, it's affecting everyone. So try to find ways where you can make an opportunity out of it. And there are plenty of them there.
Absolutely. And by trying to find an opportunity, you are being more optimistic than you are being pessimistic. You're focusing on the how I can turn this into something good versus, oh man, everything sucks, I can't control it. You're trying to find something you can control. And I think that is a great way to deal with any type of an adversity that is affecting you in some negative capacity.
Yeah, I agree. It makes all the difference in the world. And a lot of people can't really dig out of that, and they become those people who are, pretty negative and sort of don't seem to go anywhere in life, and their life doesn't appear to have a lot of meaning, because they're just sort of, stuck in a
Right.
bad rut, and they're negative. And that's not how we want to be. So as tough as it is, as scary as it is, look for the positive. Try to
Yeah.
find a way to make the best out of this and help other people around you. And I think if everyone does that, then everyone will start to kind of turn the corner there and really feel like, hey, there's something we can find here. Let's find out how to make the good around us stand out.
Yeah. And one thing that I'm noticing is we'll go for walks. Stephanie and I will go for walks. And you see a lot of people on walks, more than you would ever have seen in the past. And I think that is an interesting thing, that people are going out and enjoying the outdoors, not in like big groups or anything, but just in general. I think that's a cool thing to see.
It's interesting. I've noticed the same thing. And I read a few articles where they said wildlife was coming back to some areas that previously didn't have it.
Yeah.
In Venice, for example, they're seeing birds they haven't seen in a long time. The water appears to be clearing up, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's really good. So the
Yeah,
world
it
is
is.
changing also.
Right. Yeah, I agree. So that's kind of what I'm going to be working on in the next few weeks is trying my best to stay positive, not to let myself get into kind of a panicky or a negative funk, and just fight that with positivity.
I agree 100%. Just remember that you really can't control anything in life except yourself, your actions, and what you choose to do. That being said, if you want to chat with us, you want to just converse, want to socialize, reach out, techguyswhoinvest at gmail.com. Check out our ebook, ebook.tgwipodcast.com. If you want something to read, it gives you great tips for if you are looking for opportunities. What skill sets do you need? What strategies can you put in place to do just that? We hope this episode kind of alleviated some of the stress. If you want to chat further, like I said, reach out to us. We'd be happy to do just that and chat with you. What do you think? How do you think that this pandemic is going to affect everyday life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Reach out to us on any of the social media platforms. And if you're listening to the show for the first time, first of all, thank you. But if you want to subscribe, go to subscribe.tgwipodcast.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.